Harry Maguire wasn't part of that Manchester United defence. What do you think he would have made of that, watching from the sidelines? How would he have felt watching that?
Well, he wouldn't have enjoyed watching it, wouldn't want him to be injured, but I think he also would have understood how difficult the job was of the centre-backs. Obviously, Harry's not been in a good place. You watch him for England a week last Monday, and it's tough for him at the moment, really tough, because obviously there's a lot of scrutiny on him. England just don't have the pool of centre-backs, and I think he has got a lot of credit in the bank from his performances for England over the last few years, that Gareth Southgate trusts him, wants him in there, and if there were, we were talking about Trent earlier on with the sort of competition that he's got, you know, if there's no doubt, if there are another 3-4 top world-class centre-backs behind, like Trent's got in terms of the full-backs, then you'd be in the team, but they haven't got that, England, at this moment in time.
I think that the criticism of Gareth Southgate for playing him because he hadn't been playing for Manchester United, I thought was nonsense. He's been England's best centre-back just through his performances in the 2 tournaments. He was in team of the tournament in the last Euros. So Gareth Southgate had to pick him to actually see where he was at, where he was fitness-wise. So I had no problem with him picking him in the games. They obviously didn't go well. And that is then a big worry because he doesn't normally perform like that for England. But he performed poorly on the back of maybe not playing for Manchester United. But again, as I reiterate, he had to find that out for himself, I think, Gareth Southgate. But what it does do, it creates a big problem for Harry Maguire and the manager, because he wants to pick him, he wants him to be in the team. But I don't think it's a position he can go into a World Cup now with. If Harry Maguire is not playing for Manchester United, I don't think you can go into a tournament with the best players in the world. And also Maguire's mental state, where he is sort of confidence-wise, the criticism he gets, which I feel is over the top. I think it's a bit bullying. I think it's got to that stage, certainly on social media, almost ridiculing the lad when you actually think of what he's done, especially in an England shirt. You think of some of the great centre-backs for England who we played with, John Terry and Rio Ferdinand, probably the 2 best centre-backs we've ever seen in the Premier League. But they still never achieved what Harry Maguire's done in an England shirt in terms of getting to a final, getting to a semi-final. I know it's a team game and Harry Maguire is not as good as those players, but in an England shirt he's achieved a lot. But I think it makes it very difficult for him to start in the World Cup if he's not playing for Man United.
Would you pick him?
I think it's got to the point now, I think, whereby the injury that he's got, the form, I think Gareth Southgate will be seriously thinking of leaving him out of the team now. I think that just to protect him, I think that he's making mistakes, nothing's going his way, and I think I agree with Jamie. You can't find your form in a World Cup, particularly this one. There's no warm-up games, there's no build-up. We finish on the Sunday, I think Fulham play Manchester United last game on the 12th, 13th of November. And a week later, you're expected to be in form for the World Cup. And he might not have played for 2 or 3 weeks for United, on top of the few weeks he's not played already for United, obviously. So I just think now it's getting to that point whereby for the very first time, Gareth Southgate may be thinking that he has to bring in other centre-backs.
You spoke about sort of the mental state. I mentioned the social media. You mentioned about sort of seeing a psychologist and what that could do for him in terms of what it did for you. What was the reason? How did it help you? What could it change for him?
Yeah, I made 2 mistakes in a World Club Championship. You remember when we missed the FA Cup after the treble? And it was the inaugural tournament, a massive noise at the time because we'd missed the FA Cup and people in this country weren't happy. But we went over to Brazil. And I made 2 horrific mistakes. Look it up, Vasco da Gama, Romario on the strike.
Fiasco da Gama.
Fiasco da Gama. You know, that was the headline, and Scholesy texted me. But the 2 mistakes I made were horrific. 2 chest back passes that basically fell short, went round Mark Bosnich, or I think one of them went round Mark Bosnich, and the other one just played it into the back of the net. And from that moment on, I went from being on top of the world, coming out of the treble in unbelievable form, and then I just felt massively under pressure, to the point where by the next 4 or 5 months, I was shocking. Didn't want the ball, was hiding in games, getting subbed in European Champions League quarter-final games against Real Madrid. I remember playing at Old Trafford against Real Madrid thinking, this is just too much for me, I'm nowhere near this, I need to get off. And then went into a tournament in Belgium and Holland with England in 2000 where I was horrific. Absolutely horrific. I was shocking. And around that time, other things in your private life don't go quite as well and you just have a lot going on. And I remember saying to our doctor at United, I just need to see someone. I never spoke about that until after my career, at the end of my career, but I remember I had about 6 or 7 sessions just purely to talk it out with people or someone that I felt could help, to go through what would be some coping mechanisms. I think perspective's a really important thing as a football player. questions that you ask yourself like, did you expect that you wouldn't have a bad game? Did you think as a defender you wouldn't make mistakes? Did you think that, every game you would win? And you ask yourself those questions. And in a long career as a football player like Harry Maguire's going to have, or all these lads that we see on this list that we're going to look at, they're going to have bad moments. You see James Maddison's getting left out of the England team. These things happen to football players, and I think you need perspective, coping mechanisms, whatever you want to call them. And that's all that psychiatrist and psychologist did to me. He helped me ask myself the questions, simple questions. They work for me. I'm not saying it would work for everybody. I know you sort of said that you saw someone as well. And I think Harry's got to that point now where he must seek some type of what would be solace away from football, because look, to go and speak to your teammates and go and speak to your coaches about these types of things, not easy,
Did you have it?
Not things you do.
Yeah, it's funny because I had it in a different way in that I actually felt I had to speak to a psychologist when I was probably in my peak of my form, because the other side of it was I was putting that much pressure on myself to perform well, and I felt like I was at this stage where I'd be going into games thinking, if I don't play well, we're going to get beat, or I couldn't accept a mistake. Or even if we conceded a goal and we lost our clean sheet, because that was a big thing for me, get the clean sheet. Even if the goal wasn't my fault, it'd be constantly on my mind. And I always remember a game when I thought, I've got to speak to someone about this. And it was Atletico Madrid away in the Champions League. And I made a mistake for a goal and we drew 1-1. It was a Champions League group stage game. And on the flight back, I've got to speak to someone. This is not normal. Now, the strange thing about it was, I didn't actually change anything. It just made me realise that's who I was, and you've got to accept it. I had a real big fear of failure. If I'd lost the game or made a mistake, it would affect me for 2 or 3 days, and that's why I think it was a great decision for me not to go into management, because I think I'd find it very hard to get over defeats. That'd be a big problem for me. And I was like that as a player, to beat myself up and think I wasn't allowed to go out for a meal or a drink if we'd lost, or you'd almost go into hide, and it became too much. And just like Gary said, then it wasn't this thing of like seeing the psychologist every week. I'd see him probably 2 or 3 times a season and almost speak about how the last few months had gone. And you know what it is as well? What you've got to understand is when you're a professional player, you've got your family and friends. No one else has been in your position. It's very difficult to... we both spoke to our dad about football. We were, I was like that, but no one's been in that position and really know how you feel. It was someone just having that understanding of how you are. And I think a lot of the times, the one expression that really sticks out for me is that a lot of people think footballers are extraordinary people. They're famous, they're in the papers, they've got money. We think that this special person. They're not. They've got an extraordinary talent, but they're an ordinary person. And that's what it is. And that always sort of sticks in my mind, is that all these footballers you see in the Premier League now, they're ordinary people. They've got normal families. Criticism will affect the family as much as them. The family will be picking the phones up, the papers up. And so when you get that criticism, it does have a knock-on effect, not just with the individual.
It's interesting, though. You think about Harry Maguire at Manchester United, and obviously he's having a difficult moment there. Now, you think about the players who've sort of trodden that path before him. David Beckham post-98. Where the whole country was absolutely battering him and he had to come back and face that. You think of my brother in 2000 when he gave the penalty away and he was having effigies burned outside his house. You think of Wayne Rooney in 2006 when he got sent off against Ronaldo. These are all Manchester United players. You think of Marcus Rashford in 2020-21 when he missed the penalty and he was racially abused with obviously Jadon Sancho, another Manchester United player, and Saka. So you think of Manchester United players that have trodden that path before Harry Maguire. He's not alone here. He's not alone. He's not the first person to feel that his form's gone or that he's been vilified, he's been picked on. And that's how you feel at the time. It's only you. I know that that's how it feels. It feels like all the pressure's on you. But he must look, maybe just sort of, if he can somehow look at what's gone before. Gareth is manager after 96 when he missed the penalty and what Gareth faced. So I think all these examples of England players, that happens just quite regularly. And Harry's the man of the moment, the one that's taking the whack, the one that's, if you like, not playing well. I know there were incidents within those games, but they usually came after failure or disappointment, those moments where those players came under pressure. More often than not, it's a Manchester United player, it just happens to be. But Harry's been there. Harry's going through that now. However, I hope and sure at some point in the next 5-10 years, you'll look back and think, it was the making of me that. Because once you come through that moment of 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, where you've been at an absolute low, you think you're never going to get out of it, you don't go back there because your resilience, your sort of mental strength, your robustness, is developed into a point whereby you remember those moments where it was low. So I hope that this is where the point is now, whereby, you know, Marcus Rashford's been through it the last 12 months as well. A lot of them lads at United are going through it. So I just hope they can come out of it, because ultimately it's not something you want to see.